On a damp Tuesday evening in the quiet market town of Ashbourne, Eleanor found herself wondering where exactly her story might be unfolding in the minds of those who would hear it. She wasn't one for sharing personal tales, especially not this one. Yet, here she was, ready to recount a night that had altered her life in ways she never expected. The rain tapped insistently against the sash windows of her modest but charming cottage, the wind rattling the wooden shutters as if reminding her how silent the world could be when you lived alone in a house that felt just a shade too big for one person. Eleanor had just finished tidying the kitchen after dinner, humming a forgotten tune and savoring a second glass of Merlot. The smell of lavender soap still clung to her hands as she wiped them on a tea towel. That's when Tom appeared in the doorway, his calm, reassuring smile cutting through the dim light of the living room. "Fancy a movie?" he asked casually. Eleanor smiled, drying her hands. "I thought you'd never ask." Tom had moved back in a few months prior, after a painful breakup that had left him hollowed out. She hadn't pressed him for details. Some wounds spoke louder than words. Secretly, she welcomed his presence. Loneliness always seemed less loud with him nearby. They settled on the worn, overstuffed sofa, a soft woolen throw draped over their legs, the only light coming from the flickering television and the occasional flash of distant lightning. Outside, the storm intensified, rain hammering against the window panes, but inside, warmth and quiet comfort reigned. Tom scrolled through the streaming options, brow furrowed in concentration. Eleanor watched him from the corner of her eye. Tall and lean with chestnut hair that curled slightly at the ends, and eyes so deep they seemed to hold the weight of his recent sorrows. At 32 there was a newfound maturity about him, a quiet strength born of hardship. Eventually, they agreed on an old British detective film, one they'd both seen countless times. It wasn't about the movie, it was about sharing a silence, a space where words were unnecessary. Halfway through, she felt his arm shift, brushing lightly against hers. She didn't pull away. "Cold?" he whispered. Eleanor shook her head, though a strange lump tightened in her throat. Was it the wine? Or something else lingering in the air? Tom leaned in slightly, the faint scent of bergamot and cedarwood rising from his skin. "Eleanor," he murmured, her name soft on his lips. She turned to him, startled by the tenderness in his voice. "What is it?" He hesitated, the silence stretching between them, thick and charged. "I don't quite know how to say this, but when I'm here with you I feel something I can't explain." Eleanor's hands gripped the blanket, not from fear, but from the sudden intensity of the moment. "I know it sounds strange," he added quickly, "and maybe I shouldn't say it, but it's been this way for weeks. Every time we laugh in the kitchen, every evening we spend here. I can't deny it." There was no malice in his gaze, only unguarded honesty. "You're alone," she whispered. "So are you," he replied. And he was right. After the loss of her husband, Eleanor's days had stretched endlessly, filled mostly with silence. Tom had become her closest companion, her anchor to something living and breathing. And now this. Nothing dramatic happened that night. She took his hand softly, and he squeezed it in return. When the credits rolled, they remained still, the storm outside easing to a gentle patter. Inside, Eleanor knew something had shifted irrevocably. The next morning, the cottage felt different. She was up early, brewing coffee and staring out at the dew-soaked garden, wondering if she'd imagined the night before or secretly wished it to be more. Tom's voice broke the quiet. "Morning." Sleep still weighted his tone. "Morning," she replied. He sat down, accepting the cup she offered without a word. His eyes held hers, silent but resolute. "Eleanor, what I said last night, I meant it." The words shook her. "Tom, I don't know what to do with all this." "Neither do I," he admitted. "But pretending it's not real doesn't work. I've tried." She should have drawn a boundary, said something firm. Instead she remained still. A dormant part of her recognized exactly what he meant. The lingering glances, the long evenings on the porch, the smiles that stayed just a heartbeat too long. In the days that followed, they avoided speaking directly about that conversation, but something had undeniably changed. They moved around each other with a new gentleness, cautious as if afraid to break something fragile. One evening, folding laundry, Eleanor caught Tom watching her. He said nothing, but the way he looked at her made her heart race. Another time, while preparing dinner together, his hand brushed hers briefly as he passed a plate, lingering just a little too long. Neither of them commented, but both felt it. Then one slow evening watching a nearly silent film, Tom whispered, "You don't know how much good you do me." Eleanor looked at him. His expression was earnest, grateful, and something else unspoken. She didn't reply, but slid her hand into his on the sofa. Fingers intertwined, calm and certain. They stayed that way until the credits rolled. Reluctant to break the spell to end that silence, Eleanor understood whatever was budding between them was complex, but real, and she didn't want to ignore it any longer. The days passed with a deceptive calm, but beneath it, a quiet energy pulsed through the house. It was no longer just solitude filling the rooms, but a subtle tension, sweet and secretive, like a treasured confidence. They found excuses to spend more time together. Tom helped in the garden, offered to accompany her to the market, or they'd sit on the front porch talking late into the night. Their conversations never felt forced. Often, long pauses stretched comfortably, silence no longer a void but a shared space. One Saturday afternoon, while sorting through dusty boxes in the attic, Eleanor found an old photograph, her younger self in a summer dress, holding a baby with a toothless grin. Tom climbed the ladder to check on her and saw the photo in her hands. "You were beautiful," he said softly, peering over her shoulder. "Am I?" She replied, cheeks flushing in a way she hadn't for years. "Not all of us age the same," he said with a smile that made her look away. That evening, they dined in the garden under a sky painted with shades of orange and purple. A breeze stirred the candles flickering on the table. "You ever wonder what we're doing?" she asked, breaking the silence. Tom put down his fork and met her gaze. "Yeah, but I know one thing, I don't want to stop." His words hung between them as they finished their meal, unspoken understanding passing like a secret. Weeks went by, their closeness growing natural. They sought each other's eyes across rooms, a brief touch sending shivers. No rush, no plans, just a rhythm they discovered together. One evening, after dinner, they sat on the couch watching a documentary. Eleanor had her legs curled beneath her. Tom sat close enough to share warmth. His hand brushed her arm gently. She turned to him, meeting his steady gaze. Not a question, not a plea, just a quiet moment. "Eleanor," he whispered, "I care for you more than I can say." A lump rose in her throat. She didn't answer with words, only placed her hand over his. It stayed warm and sure. New habits blossomed. Breakfast cooked side by side, knowing when to leave space or when to invite company. Shared walks through the autumn-kissed park with its golden carpet of leaves. They talked of books, memories, dreams, sometimes nothing at all. To the pond, watching ducks glide over glassy water, Eleanor confessed, "I can't remember the last time I felt this at peace." "Me neither," Tom said softly. Back home, as she tidied the kitchen, Tom appeared with 2 steaming mugs of herbal tea. "You know," he said, leaning against the counter, "this house feels different since I came back." Alive, she smiled, hiding how much those words touched her. "Maybe it's just the season." "No," he insisted. "It's something more." Their bond deepened, unspoken but undeniable. No grand declarations, no dramatic gestures, just the steady, quiet presence of 2 souls intertwining. One rainy night, wind shaking the trees, they found themselves again on the sofa wrapped in a blanket. Tom reached for a book on the coffee table but settled beside her instead, close enough to hear her breath. Without warning, he took her hand, gentle, deliberate. "Are you all right?" she asked. "Yes," he said, "but I wanted to make sure you were too." She realized he meant more than that night, more than just the moment. With a small smile she replied, "I am." From then on, caution gave way to freedom. They prepared meals together, read side by side, talked late into the night. It was simple, yet charged with meaning. Though they never named it, Eleanor knew their connection had changed everything. Winter crept in, bringing short days and slate-gray skies. But the cottage no longer echoed with emptiness. It was infused with light, warmth, and life. Mornings began with shared coffee, evenings with quiet companionship and the soft hum of the radio. One snowy night, as snowflakes drifted past the window, Tom closed his book and said, "You know what I like most about living here?" "What?" "That I never feel out of place." Those words wrapped around Eleanor like a soft embrace, less a casual remark, more a quiet vow. In time, it became clear they cared little for society's labels or judgments. Their life was built on small moments, the smell of freshly baked bread on Sunday mornings, slow walks beneath bare trees, reading the same book in turns. One afternoon, Tom appeared with a bunch of wildflowers, freshly picked from a nearby trail. "Not from a florist," he said, placing them on the table. "Just what I found." They arranged the blooms in a simple vase and sat quietly, the gesture saying more than words. The morning sun spilled softly through the lace curtains of Eleanor's bedroom, casting delicate patterns on the worn wooden floorboards. Outside, the garden was alive with the fresh promise of spring. Daffodils nodded gently, and the scent of damp earth mingled with the faint aroma of freshly brewed coffee. Eleanor stirred in bed, a faint smile tugging at her lips as she recalled the quiet intimacy of last night, the warmth of Tom's hand, the steady rhythm of their shared breath, the silent language that had blossomed between them like the early blossoms outside. She slipped out of bed, her bare feet touching the cool floor, and wrapped herself in a silken dressing gown, its soft fabric whispering against her skin. The gown was pale blush pink, cinched loosely at the waist with a sash, revealing just enough to hint at the graceful curve of her neck and the gentle swell of her collarbone. Her dark chestnut hair, still damp from the evening's wash, clung in soft tendrils around her face, framing her sparkling green eyes that held a trace of something new, hope perhaps, or the tentative thrill of a life rediscovered. Downstairs, Tom was already in the kitchen, the sun catching the slight silver at his temples and the soft stubble that shadowed his jaw. He was dressed casually in a faded navy sweater and worn jeans, the kind of outfit that suggested comfort and familiarity rather than effort. As Eleanor entered, he glanced up, his eyes lighting with that quiet, steady warmth she had come to cherish. "Morning," he said, his voice low and husky from sleep. "Morning," she replied, her voice still soft and husky in its own way. Tom moved to pour 2 mugs of coffee, the rich aroma filling the room, blending with the scent of fresh bread he'd baked the night before, a small tradition they'd quietly adopted. He handed her a mug, their fingers brushing briefly, sending a subtle thrill up Eleanor's spine. They settled at the small oak table by the window, the one that overlooked the garden bench now freshly repaired and adorned with a scattering of wildflowers. Outside, the sky was a clear blue canvas, promising a day full of possibilities. "Oh," Tom began, stirring cream into his coffee. "What's on the agenda for today? Another battle with the garden, or perhaps a literary adventure?" Eleanor laughed, the sound light and free. "I was thinking of tackling the attic again. There's something about those dusty boxes I can't quite shake." Tom raised an eyebrow, a teasing smile playing on his lips. "Don't get too ambitious. We wouldn't want you to pull a muscle, or worse, unearth some ancient curse." She rolled her eyes. "If I find a treasure map, I'll make sure to share it." He chuckled, the sound warm and genuine. "I'll hold you to that." The attic was a cramped space, its sloping ceiling and exposed beams creating a cozy yet claustrophobic atmosphere. Dust motes danced in the shafts of sunlight as Eleanor sifted through forgotten belongings, old letters tied with faded ribbons, yellowed photographs, and knickknacks that whispered stories of lives once lived. Near the far corner, beneath a tattered quilt, she discovered a small wooden box, intricately carved with delicate ivy leaves and tiny acorns. The wood was smooth and worn, its surface warm to the touch despite the chill in the air. Curious, she lifted the lid. Inside lay a collection of letters, bound together with a crimson ribbon. The handwriting was elegant, looping in careful script. The ink faded but still legible. Eleanor's heart quickened as she unfolded the top letter. It was addressed to a Beatrice, dated nearly 60 years ago. The words brimming with longing and secret promises. She glanced over her shoulder. "Tom, you might want to see this." He climbed the ladder beside her, eyes widening as he read the opening lines. "Sounds like a proper love story." "More than that," Eleanor whispered. "There's mention of a hidden place, something about where the garden meets the sky." Tom smiled, a sly glint in his eye. "Sounds like a mystery. Just what we need to spice up our quiet little lives." Eleanor felt a thrill, a spark of excitement that mingled intriguingly with the calm warmth she'd grown used to. The house, the garden, even their shared moments seemed suddenly infused with another layer. A secret waiting to be uncovered. As they descended the attic ladder, Eleanor's gaze caught the window again, the one in the far corner that faced the garden bench. For a fleeting moment she thought she saw a shadow move, a subtle flicker at the edge of her vision. She blinked and it was gone. "Did you see that?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. Tom shook his head, amusement in his expression. Probably just a trick of the light, but Eleanor wasn't so sure. The day stretched ahead, full of quiet promise and the lingering question of what lay hidden in those old letters, what stories the walls of the cottage had yet to tell, and what secrets the garden might be keeping beneath its blossoming surface. And somewhere, just beyond the edge of the known, a mystery waited to unravel, threading its way into their lives with the slow inevitability of spring itself. The afternoon sun slanted through the tall sash windows of the sitting room, casting long golden beams that tangled with the dust motes drifting lazily in the air. Eleanor sat curled on the faded velvet armchair, the crimson ribbon from the letters loosely wrapped around her slender fingers. The attic box rested on the low coffee table beside her, its carved lid now shut but heavy with promise. Tom paced near the fireplace, his hands shoved deep into the pockets of his worn jeans, the blue of his eyes clouded with thought. Where the garden meets the sky. Sounds like some poetic nonsense, but maybe there's something to it, he muttered. Could be a spot in the garden or maybe a clue left by whoever Beatrice was. Eleanor's gaze drifted to the window, where the garden stretched out in a riot of spring blooms. Daffodils nodding their golden heads, lavender bushes already promising their fragrant bounty, and the old oak tree standing sentinel at the far edge, its branches reaching toward the heavens. Perhaps the secret lay beneath those ancient boughs. She rose gracefully, the soft swish of her silk dressing gown punctuating the quiet room. The fabric clung gently to her curves, the faint outline of lace at the neckline lending a delicate, almost forbidden allure. Her bare feet padded softly across the worn carpet as she stepped outside onto the stone-paved patio, the cool air teasing the warmth of her skin. Tom followed, handing her a light jacket as a breeze stirred the garden. "You're not going out like that," he said with mock sternness, his usual easy smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "That am I not allowed to be a bit mysterious?" Eleanor teased, pulling the jacket around her shoulders. "Besides, I'm on a mission," he chuckled, watching her with an expression that mixed affection and curiosity. "All right, detective. Where to first?" Together they wandered through the garden, the soft crunch of gravel underfoot mingling with the distant chirping of birds. Eleanor's fingers brushed over the velvety petals of a rose bush, and Tom stooped to examine a patch of wild thyme growing near the garden wall. Maybe the garden meeting the sky means that spot where the oak tree's branches seem to dissolve into the clouds, Eleanor mused, eyes fixed upward. Tom nodded thoughtfully. Or maybe it's just a fancy way of saying the treehouse your dad built when you were a kid. Eleanor laughed, the sound bright and clear. "You remember that?" "Of course," he said, a mischievous glint in his eye. "How could I forget the Great Fall of '95? You broke an arm but insisted the treehouse was worth it." She shook her head, the memory vivid with both pain and joy. "I was fearless back then." "Maybe you still are," Tom offered quietly. They reached the base of the oak tree, its rough bark cool under Eleanor's palm. The treehouse was gone now, long dismantled, but she could almost hear the echoes of childhood laughter in the rustling leaves. Suddenly Tom's foot caught on something buried beneath a tangle of ivy and moss. He crouched and pulled aside the greenery, revealing a weathered iron box, its surface mottled with rust but still intact. "Well, would you look at that?" he said, grinning as he pried it free. Eleanor's heart quickened. "Open it." Tom fumbled with the latch, finally popping it open to reveal a bundle of objects wrapped in oilskin, a faded leather-bound journal, a silver locket tarnished by time, and a folded piece of parchment. Carefully, Eleanor unfolded the parchment. It was a map, crudely drawn but unmistakable, a sketch of the garden with a red X marked near the old well at the far corner. Her fingers trembled as she traced the lines. "This has to be it." Tom looked at her, eyes shining with shared excitement. "Looks like our quiet little life just got a whole lot more interesting." They moved toward the old well, its stone rim covered in creeping ivy and shaded by the sprawling branches of the oak. The air was thick with the scent of earth and growing things, and Eleanor felt a thrill of anticipation that was almost electric. Kneeling by the well, Tom brushed away leaves and dirt until he uncovered a small, rusted keyhole embedded in the stone. The journal's clasp jingled as Eleanor took the key from inside the leather cover. An ornate piece with intricate filigree, she slid it into the lock, and with a soft click, a hidden compartment in the well's side creaked open. Inside lay a small wooden box, painted a deep forest green and adorned with delicate hand-painted flowers. Eleanor lifted it out reverently, the weight of history settling around them like a cloak. Opening the box, they found a collection of photographs, letters, and a tiny music box carved with the same ivy pattern as the attic chest. Eleanor wound the music box, and a soft, haunting melody filled the air, the kind of tune that stirred something deep and ancient in the soul. Tom watched her, his gaze steady and full of unspoken questions. "What do you think this all means?" Eleanor asked, voice barely above a whisper. Tom hesitated, then said, "Maybe it's not about the past at all. Maybe it's about what we're meant to find now." As the music played, A shadow flickered again in the corner of Eleanor's eye. The same elusive movement she'd noticed days before near the attic window. She blinked, heart pounding. "Did you see that?" she asked, turning sharply. Tom looked around but saw nothing but the peaceful garden bathed in late afternoon light. "Probably just the wind," he said. But Eleanor wasn't convinced. The melody from the music box wound down, leaving a silence filled with questions and possibilities. An unspoken promise that the quiet life they'd built was on the verge of being transformed forever. And somewhere beyond the garden's edge, beneath the watchful branches of the old oak, a secret waited patiently to reveal itself. The sky had slipped into dusk, the last hues of pink and lavender melting into a deepening navy. The garden, once vibrant and alive with color, now lay softened under the gentle cloak of twilight, shadows stretching long beneath the ancient oak. Eleanor and Tom stood near the old well, the green wooden box resting quietly between them on the stone rim. The music box's melody had faded into the evening air, leaving a hush that felt almost sacred. Eleanor's fingers lingered on the delicate carvings, the faint scent of old cedar and rosewood rising from its polished surface. The moment felt suspended, as if the world had paused to hold its breath. Tom broke the silence, voice low and thoughtful. "We should look through these properly inside. There's something about this whole thing that doesn't feel accidental." Eleanor nodded, her green eyes reflecting the soft glow of the lantern Tom had fetched from the porch. They made their way back into the cottage, the door creaking softly behind them, sealing out the night inside. The sitting room was bathed in the warm, golden light of the fireplace, the flickering flames casting dancing shadows on the walls. Eleanor placed the box gently on the coffee table, and together they unfolded the scattered papers and photographs. The images were sepia-toned and fragile, capturing moments frozen in time. A young woman with a wistful smile, a man with eyes full of quiet determination, a garden in full bloom much like the one outside. Each photograph was a glimpse into a story Eleanor felt inexplicably drawn to. She picked up a letter, the paper brittle yet carefully preserved. The handwriting was elegant but hurried, the words filled with longing and secrets. "My dearest Beatrice," it began, "the days grow colder, but my heart burns with the hope of our reunion. The garden holds our memories, and beneath the old oak lies the promise of a future we both dream of." Eleanor's breath caught. The letter was a confession, a vow, a piece of a love story that had remained hidden for decades. Tom glanced over her shoulder, a flicker of emotion crossing his usually composed face. "It's like stepping into someone else's life." She looked up, eyes shining. "And yet, it feels so close. Like it's part of this place. Part of you." As they continued to sift through the contents, Eleanor noticed a folded piece of paper tucked beneath the journal. Unfolding it carefully, she revealed a map, different from the one found in the box. This one marked with cryptic symbols and what looked like a series of coordinates or perhaps a code. Tom leaned in, tracing the lines with a finger. "Now that's intriguing." A sudden chill swept through the room, as if the house itself was responding to their discovery. Eleanor wrapped the soft shawl around her shoulders, feeling the familiar stirrings of excitement mingled with unease outside. The wind had picked up, rattling the window panes and sending a shudder through the walls. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed to deepen, and for a moment Eleanor thought she saw a flicker of movement, a silhouette just beyond the glass. "Did you see that?" she whispered, voice barely audible. Tom shook his head, forcing a smile. "Probably just a trick of the light." But Eleanor's heart beat faster, a knot tightening in her stomach. The line between past and present, between memory and reality, felt thinner tonight. They decided to leave the map aside for the moment, focusing instead on the journal. Its pages were filled with entries, diary-like reflections, sketches of the garden, notes about people who had lived in the house long before Eleanor and Tom. One entry, dated nearly 60 years ago, caught Eleanor's eye. "Tonight, beneath the oak, I buried our secret. Not a treasure of gold or jewels, but something far more precious. A promise. May those who find it understand the weight of love and the courage it takes to keep it alive." Eleanor's fingers trembled slightly as she read the words aloud, but Tom's gaze was steady, unwavering. "It seems whoever wrote this wanted their story to be found, but only by the right people." A sudden crack from the fireplace made them both jump, laughter breaking the tension. Eleanor smiled, the warmth of the room battling the chill that still clung to the edges of her thoughts. "Maybe," she said, "we're those people." The night deepened, wrapping the cottage in its quiet embrace. As they prepared to turn in, Eleanor paused by the window, looking out toward the garden bathed in moonlight. The old oak stood tall and silent, its branches whispering secrets to the stars. Her reflection gazed back at her, soft eyes, flushed cheeks, a hint of something indefinable shadowing her smile behind her. Tom's footsteps approached, and his hand found hers in the dark. "Whatever this is," he said softly, "we face it together." Eleanor squeezed his hand, the unspoken promise sealing between them, but as the clock chimed midnight, a faint tapping echoed from the attic, a rhythmic, deliberate sound that neither could ignore, and somewhere, just beyond the reach of the moonlight, a hidden door creaked open, revealing a darkness that held more than just dust and forgotten memories. The past was stirring, and with it, a mystery that would test everything Eleanor and Tom believed about love, loss, and the secrets we keep hidden in the shadows. The tapping persisted, soft yet insistent, echoing through the cottage like a heartbeat in the quiet night. Eleanor and Tom exchanged a glance, the unspoken question hanging thick in the air. Who or what was calling them from the depths of the attic? Drawn by a mixture of curiosity and unease, they ascended the narrow wooden stairs, each step creaking beneath their weight. The attic door stood slightly ajar, a sliver of darkness spilling into the dim hallway. Eleanor reached out, fingers trembling slightly, and pushed the door open wider. Inside, the attic was cloaked in shadows, the faint glow from the hallway lantern barely piercing the gloom. Dust swirled in the stale air, motes catching the light like tiny stars suspended in time. The usual clutter of forgotten trunks and boxes seemed undisturbed, until Eleanor's eyes caught sight of something unusual near the far corner. A faint glimmer reflected off a small object partially hidden beneath a moth-eaten blanket. Eleanor stepped forward, heart pounding, and pulled the fabric aside. There, resting on the worn floorboards, lay an old brass key, ornate, its intricate design matching the delicate ivy carvings from the wooden box they had found earlier. Tom knelt beside her, his voice a low whisper. "This has to be connected, but to what?" Eleanor's fingers closed around the key, its metal cool and surprisingly heavy. The tapping had ceased, replaced by a heavy silence that seemed to press in from all sides. Suddenly, a creak from the far wall caught their attention. Tom shone the lantern's beam toward the noise, revealing a narrow seam in the wooden paneling, almost imperceptible but unmistakably a door. "Looks like we found our secret passage," he murmured, eyes bright with anticipation. Eleanor swallowed, a thrill of fear and excitement mingling in her chest. "Do you want to see what's behind it?" Tom's smile was steady, reassuring. After you, with slow, deliberate movements, Eleanor slid the brass key into a hidden lock embedded in the panel. The mechanism clicked, and the door creaked open to reveal a narrow staircase spiraling upward into darkness. They exchanged a glance before stepping inside, the air growing cooler and more charged with every step. At the top, the stairs opened into a small, dust-filled room that looked untouched by time. Against the far wall stood a tall wooden cabinet, its glass doors fogged with age. Eleanor approached cautiously, wiping away the grime to reveal a collection of objects. Delicate porcelain figurines, faded letters, and a leather-bound book embossed with the same ivy pattern that had followed them through their discoveries. She opened the book, its pages filled with a mixture of poetry, sketches, and cryptic notes. One passage caught her eye. "To unlock the past is to invite its shadows. Beware the cost, for some secrets are guarded by more than memory." A chill ran down Eleanor's spine. Tom, standing beside her, glanced nervously toward the narrow window, where the moonlight barely penetrated the heavy curtains. Suddenly, a soft whisper seemed to drift through the room, faint but unmistakable. "Eleanor," she froze, heart hammering. Tom reached out, his hand steady over hers. "Did you hear that?" She nodded, eyes wide. "It's like a voice." The whisper came again, more urgent this time, echoing off the walls. "Find the truth, before it's too late." Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. The mysteries of the house, the letters, the garden, they were no longer just relics of the past. They were warnings, invitations, perhaps even pleas. Tom tightened his grip on her hand. "Whatever this is, we'll face it together." But as they turned to leave, the door slammed shut behind them with a deafening bang, plunging the room into darkness. Eleanor's voice trembled. "Tom?" His lantern flickered wildly, casting eerie shadows that danced like phantoms, and somewhere, deep within the walls of the old house, a secret stirred, ancient, restless, and watching. The night had only just begun.